All right, everyone, welcome back to Around the Bird Bath. And tonight, maybe appropriate, Adrian, on the final night of the college baseball 2024 season as Texas
Hmm.
A&M and Tennessee are playing right now, both trying to win their first national championship in school history for baseball. Coming on for an emergency podcast, just in the wake of the news of, we dropped the blog a few weeks ago of for the first time, UTSA is losing impact guys to the portal, and now there's been an even bigger trickle down effect, even more contributors in the portal, even more what's Jared's word for kind of the like standouts, even more standout guys in the portal now, and just really just trying to
Um,
gather.
uh,
Is it contributor
uh,
than standout? I think standouts after contributor, right?
yeah, contributors stand out, and there's cornerstone.
Right. So
You're
maybe
right.
not any cornerstone guys. We got to see what happens with these guys later in their career, but definitely a couple standout guys, and really just trying to make sense of it all and get our thoughts on what's going on with all this.
Yeah, so it was exactly 2 weeks ago, Dan, that you dropped the blog for the first time in the Hallmark era. UTSA Baseball loses contributors, impact guys, right? So significant guys on the rotation on the lineup. And I don't know that list has since doubled in size since the time that you wrote that article, published that article.
Yeah, I mean, going off of D1 Baseball's tracker, and they do a great job of updating that as often they can with both departures and guys coming in. And then even like what you've seen guys dropping on Twitter, most recently, Ruger Riojas announcing today that he was entering the transfer portal. I mean, I think the list now is probably up to close to 15 guys. When you factor in the guys that have graduated, I think now you're up to like 20, 21 guys that won't, like, 21 less guys that'll be on next year's team. So a big spot for Coach Hallmark to fill
It's a
and
full,
everything.
it's a completely new, I mean, it's a completely cleaned house. A completely cleaned house. This is an exodus. This is a mass migration. Everyone is leaving UTSA. At this point, you're talking about like a full roster rebuild. There's nobody left on the team.
Yeah.
Like go, can you go through the list? Can you just go through the list?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and
for
then and
sure.
then and then and then maybe let us know, as far as your ranking goes, contributor, standout, or you know, won't be missed.
Definitely. And let me say first before we get into this, because we're gonna have a lot to talk about. I don't have any big revelation. I don't have any news like, oh, Coach Hallmark or so and so from the staff is leaving. None of that I've heard. I haven't heard anything from that. Alamo Audible hasn't heard anything of that. We
Mm-hmm.
haven't heard anything in terms of, oh, there's issues in the locker room or this happened or that happened, which can happen a lot of times. Because a lot of times,
Right.
like, let's talk about Wichita State. Like last year, they had a weird coaching thing happen, and their entire team essentially went in the portal. And we're talking like all 35 guys. That worked out for them. The rebuild worked out for them, and
Well,
so
that's
we
what it
don't have
looks
anything.
like when you see the quantity of UTSA. I mean, that's the first thing that would come to a fan's mind is, oh, there
Sure.
must be coaching turnover, some sort of coaching change. And so, very good call on the disclaimer. No, from what social media says, from what all of our communications and quote unquote sources, whatever. No one has said anything about Hallmark or anyone else leaving.
Right. Yeah. And I think some of this, and we're going to talk about it. Some of this is just the new norm for mid majors in terms of
Mhm.
guys getting poached by power schools, or guys just wanting a fresh start, and it's easier than ever to transfer. But getting to that list, so this is the current list that D1 Baseball has in their tracker. And let me say this: D1 Baseball has 2,119 or 2,119 guys in the portal right now on their tracker.
Wow.
There's 300 schools in Division One baseball. Some of these guys go to JUCO. UTSA has already had a couple guys go back to the JUCO route. But I mean, I don't even know how you manage the transfer portal if you're a head coach. You got over 2,000 entries, but Isaiah Walker, I'd say he's definitely a contributor. He's been hurt a little bit the last 2 seasons, unfortunately, both this past season and the year before, but what he brought to the field, contributor. Barrett Johnson, he was a true freshman this year, never played, never saw the field, so don't really have anything to go off of for him in
Hmm.
Division I baseball. Ryan Beard was, came in as a freshman. His uncle played at UTSA back in the 90s. I'd
Mm.
say, even though Ryan Beard maybe didn't have the best, you know, season at UTSA, like he was still relied on and he still helped us win some games this year. Um, and came in at important times and had really good outings. So we'll give him like a contributor. He was a guy. Hector Rodriguez, third base, shortstop, kind of played all over. Came in this
Hmm.
this year from I think Galveston Community College. You know, I don't want to say bust necessarily because Hector had some big moments, but I think you know he just didn't have the best season, unfortunately, and I hope he does well. He just actually announced that he's going to transfer to Lamar. He posted that on his
Mm. Okay.
Instagram and his Twitter. And so, good luck to Hector down there in Houston, outside of Houston. Colin Correjo, another guy was a true freshman this year, never played. Mark Henning, I really liked Mark Henning's. I'd say Mark Henning was a contributor because he had a really good glove at first base. A lot of times you saw him come into the game later when UTSA needed that tighter defense at first base, and his bat did start to come on a little bit at the end of the season.
Hmm.
Um, but never really, at least numbers wise, measured up to what I think they were hoping for at the at the start of the season or after the fall. Cooper Herbacek, good stuff, but limited action. Transferred in, didn't really work out. One of the big ones, Matt King, 3 year starter. I mean, played as a true freshman, was on the team that got snubbed out of the regional.
Yeah.
Team asked him to move. I mentioned a lot about him in the piece in the blog, just almost like a farewell to Matt. He
Hmm.
committed to Arizona State. They're going to be in the Big 12 next year, so big opportunity for him. Preston Freeman, I think he actually left in the fall, but he's still and I think he's playing at a JUCO somewhere. I think he committed somewhere. Aiden Bauman was a sophomore this year. I don't know where he's going to end up yet. I wouldn't really consider Preston or Aiden contributors.
Okay.
Um, and then some other people like that I've seen on Twitter. Tanner Seaver was a true freshman this year, played infield. He already committed to a community college here in Texas. And then the big one today, kind of already talked about it, but Ruger Riojas mentioning that he's
Mm.
in the portal. Uh, was our main kind of long reliever, middle reliever closer this year. Definitely some games where Ruger comes in and locks things down. Very similar season to Simon Miller last year, in both good and bad ways, right? Or not in positive and maybe some not so good outings or maybe some ways he was used. But yeah, I
Right.
mean, really kind of just like three categories, right? Right. Of a handful of guys that's like, hey, maybe they just said maybe they had their team meetings and maybe they said, we can't promise you that we're going to have more money for you next year. Can't,
Hmm.
Division One baseball only gets 11.7 scholarships for their 30, 40 guys. They can disperse that among 30 guys. Um, maybe they said, hey, like we can't promise you're going to be a starter next year. Another one that I forgot to mention, he's not showing up in the tracker yet, but he announced on Twitter, Zane Spin, another guy, came
Hmm.
in with a really good glove, really good middle infield defense. His bat just wasn't there. Kind of got platooned a little bit, but yeah. So you've got those guys. You've got kind of our journeyman guys. Like they come in, doesn't really work out for them, so maybe they're gonna go somewhere else, try something new, get a fresh start. And then you've got
Right.
those guys like Isaiah, Matt King, Ryan Beard, Ruger Riojas, where came in out of high school and made an impact right away. And even those guys are kind of like, and I don't, even those four individuals kind of have their own, there's probably more to it for why they're they're transferring, right? Like maybe it's their final year of eligibility. Maybe
Right.
they want to position themselves for a draft position, or maybe they're just like, yeah, I'm gonna go get some money and play somewhere else. I don't know. I mean, NIL is it's kind of the wild, wild west out there in a lot of ways right now.
Probably a culmination of it. Yeah, I think that's right. And when it comes to those guys that just have 1 year of eligibility left and they were impact players, contributors to some degree, you have 1 year left. It's coming down to two things. And if you're good enough, maybe you're getting a little bit of both of those worlds. But it's trying to get to a place where you can play yourself into a draft position or go somewhere where you can make some NIL dollars and or I guess go somewhere you can make NIL dollars. And so I get it. Those guys that are a Matt King on the list, probably a lot more opportunity for him outside of UTSA as far as what is the next move in his career. What can he make as a student athlete right now in 2025? So those sort of make sense. And then you have your journeyman, which it seems like those two groups might be the largest groups of this entire list of transfer guys is impact guys with a little bit of eligibility left, and maybe they're just trying to find another opportunity, a bigger opportunity, I should say, or the journeyman. The journeyman transferred in from somewhere else. Now they're going to transfer elsewhere. Always just looking for a place where they can get some time on the field in actual games, trying to play their way into a position, right? I don't know. Is it like just insanely coincidental that UTSA has this many impact guys with 1 or 2 years left of eligibility that are looking for other opportunities and this many journeymen that just happen to also say, well, let me go look for another opportunity? Because if you have this exodus of impact players that were starters, shouldn't those journeymen be sitting there at UTSA thinking to themselves, oh, awesome. Now I've got my shot because Matt's leaving. Matt's going to the portal. Matt's going to Arizona State. Now I can play in. Now I know I'll make the cut. Why is it all happening so much with such a long laundry list? Is it also something else in the locker room? Is it also a culture fit? Are guys sick of the lack of facilities? Is it, um, Hallmark's Hallmark's old school, old fashioned, right? A bit of a hard ass. We love that about him. But players and coaches, do they want to go play somewhere where it's a little bit easier to practice? I don't know. I don't know. So it is very, very peculiar, Dan, that both of these are happening at the same time because you figure journeymen would look forward to impact guys leaving, not also leave right behind them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's what's hard too about social media and timing and everything because you know you might have a guy that and I guess what I'm getting at here is some of those journeymen announced before the impact guys that they were leaving, like guys like Mark Henning, Zane Spin, Hector Rodriguez. They mentioned before Isaiah Walker that they were transferring. Does that mean that like you know those that like what you mentioned about like having your shot doesn't apply? Not necessarily. Maybe Isaiah decided a few weeks ago that he was going to enter and was just having a little more thought about it, a few more conversations about it, and
Mhm.
and he really wanted to just be careful and make sure that was the right decision before he put it out there to the Twitterverse for people like me and others to be like, all right, well he's gone. Unfortunately, he's going to be a guy to miss. Um, so the correlation is definitely interesting, and you mentioned Coach Hallmark. You look at it's interesting because I mentioned in the blog that this is the first time really in the transfer portal era that UTSA has been hit hard. Well, let's look at the last couple of years, right? 2022, they have a lot of seasoned guys. They got a lot of good guys on the team. They have a heck of a year, and they have one of the best years in terms of RPI and whatnot in UTSA baseball history. They don't go to regionals. We've talked about that ad nauseum. 2023, you got all those guys coming back for their super senior year last year. They're hungry. They feel slighted. They feel, snubbed. So
Hmm.
they're like, all right, we're gonna run it back. We're gonna show
Yeah.
them that we got it. So nobody wants to leave after that year because they all want to make the haters pay, right? And they want to show them what's what.
Redemption. Yeah, the redemption tour. Yeah, almost had the conference title, almost won the conference tournament, lost it 2022. Now 2023, you're back like whenever the Spurs lost to the Heat the first time and came back the second time, 2014 finals. That's what it felt like. It felt like we were going to go on this war tear in 2023, but it didn't quite like pan out that way, right?
Yeah, and that gets us, probably another podcast for another day, but in depth and guys, getting injured and
But
whatnot.
this team was damn good in 2024. I mean, so much better than they anticipated being. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the preseason vibe or energy was in the locker room for this team, but I've got to imagine they weren't super bullish on themselves finishing as well as they had in 2022 and 2023. Fine. I don't think anybody expects to, but then they come out and they spend the whole first half of the season on top of the conference, their first year in a new conference and a better conference, and they beat teams that were favored to win the conference and in opening conference series. And so they turned a lot of heads. They impressed a lot of people. They played damn good baseball. They just sort of, I don't know, peaked too early or flamed out, I think. But it's not like this team was so bad all year long and guys just want to go somewhere where they can win. This team was good. This team was competitive. This team could have won every single game that they played in, won a lot of games that they played in. I don't know. It just that's the other part of it, right? I mean, if coach wasn't going anywhere and you knew that coach wasn't going anywhere, but we're losing all these games, maybe the exodus makes a little bit more sense. But this was a good baseball team last year. Your coach is staying.
Yeah.
I, I,
I'll say this. I feel like and take this opinion for what you will, right? I feel like this team was set up really well for weekend series. Like you had a guy like Yuli came back from injury every Sunday. He was giving you 5, 6, 7 innings. You had bullpen guys like Daniel Garza, Fisher Kingsbury, Ruger Riojas that you knew you could get 3, 4, 5 innings out of them. You had other guys like Braylon Owens, Ryan Beard, who's in the portal. Um, like you had there was times where they gave you some good innings. So you drop a game in a weekend series, it's like, well, we still won the series. We still
yeah,
took 2 out of 3 from them. So you're still positive on that win-loss chart, right? But then you get into tournament play, like what we've seen the last couple seasons. And now if you don't have that pitching depth, and if you got some guys banged up, and I've talked about this before, it is so hard in college baseball, especially at the mid-major level, to know like who's healthy and who's not. And unless if you got someone directly telling you like, yes, this person is injured and they're not playing or whatever, um, you just don't know. So like maybe we don't know the state of the team at the end of the season, but I think you get into that tournament play and you look at like that game against Charlotte and you bring Dan Garza in and he goes 4 innings and you still drop the game in extra innings. Well, now you just burned him for the rest of the week or for the next
yeah,
couple games, right? And so I think this team, just because of the difficulties we saw in pitching with the depth at times, I think they were set up really well for like weekend series. I just don't know if they were set up the best for like a tournament play.
yeah. I hear you, and it's ironic that we're pointing to the lack of depth being a reason why so many guys are leaving the program. But yeah, I mean, if you have more of that pitching depth, can you make a deeper conference run either in this season or the season prior? Maybe. But I don't know. This to me, Dan, it seems to point to a larger issue, and I don't think it's one that's like a cultural sort of thing or any sort of beef with Hallmark or the fact that they're not competitive on the field. I think there's a good locker room culture for this baseball team. I think this team likes playing together, but I don't know. I just think that they feel limited in what UTSA has to offer.
Yeah.
And that's by way of facilities, that's by way of NIL dollars. But I it would feel unfair to say that's by way of opportunity because I feel like there's plenty of opportunity here. You're playing really good baseball teams, week in and week out, in conference and out of conference. You get good opponents here. You get your time to shine, and you're in a competitive conference, in a good conference. So I can't blame that. I can't point to that and say that's the reason why. But facilities and NIL dollars, guys getting a little tired of that. Yeah, sure. I don't know. I can't think. What I guess what I'm saying is I can't imagine like a different finish over the last 3 years changing this mass transfer exodus, aside from maybe a conference tournament win or maybe a regional appearance or playing game. I don't know. In my opinion, outside of winning a conference tournament, was something like this maybe sort of bound to happen to UTSA baseball? Sure, because like whenever you look at other programs, when you look at football, for example, you have the investment, you have the buy-in. It's a little bit easier to stick around. Maybe if you're not getting that playing time, you're on a winning program. You know facilities are on the way. If you're on basketball, you know you're getting a new practice facility coming in. There's something easier to sell for Austin Clunch. Pat Hallmark, man, doesn't have a whole lot to sell right now. He's trying to get guys to come in, and if you're a new player looking to come in and fill this mass exodus, you got to be scratching your head wondering why did all these guys leave in the first place? But I don't know. There's a hell of a lot of opportunity here to go and get some guys that are competitive. But an exodus like this, Dan, I mean, what is the ramifications for a 2025 UTSA baseball team?
And I think part of that's going to be because so the portal closes on July 2nd. And why it's July 2nd is it's 45 days after whenever the college postseason field is announced. So they announced the 64 teams, and then they 40 they go 45 days out, and that's when the portal closes. Of course, there's gonna be some trickle effect. A guy could enter on July 2nd and takes a little bit for the paperwork to come in and whatnot. Grad transfers just across the board with portal stuff, they can enter whenever. So I think in terms of like 2025 outlook a little bit, I think we've got to kind of wait and see, like, okay, like, because that's what's interesting too, right? Like Matt entered, and you look at him entering, it's like, okay, I can see that for a couple different reasons, and I touched on that in the blog. And then Matt entering kind of starts like the next wave of like the journeyman and other guys entering, and then it kind of quieted down a little bit, and then it starts back up again, and then Isaiah drops it kind of out of left field, and then Ruger
Hmm.
drops it, whatnot. So like it picked back up again. So you're like, all right, so are we gonna see like the second wave and the secondary and tertiary effect now of all these guys leaving? Because there's probably gonna be some guys that are like, man, like I only got 1 year left. I don't want to be a part of a rebuild. Like I don't want to, because
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
I'll say this: last year, 19 guys, like there were 21 remaining or returning starters on the 2024 team. So 19 guys left to either transfer portal or graduation. This year it's kind of flipped. You had less guys graduate this year, but you have more guys transfer in. Who knows how high that number is going to get? Hopefully it doesn't get too high. Hopefully we don't get to 30. Otherwise, Coach Hallmark and his staff are going to be working all summer and all fall trying to get guys to commit. But I think that's the biggest thing, to see like what the effect is, because we kind of saw it a little bit this year. You had a lot of new guys coming in, a lot of new guys starting. I think you only had two main returning starters in the starting nine for 2024 from 2023. So that takes some chemistry, and that non-conference play is gonna be maybe a little rusty, and you're gonna be platooning guys again, bouncing guys around again, trying to see where they play. Um, you got some impressive freshmen coming in, so that gives you hope, right? But then we hear Coach Traylor talk about this in his interviews, getting in football a little bit. He's like, "Oh, I'm not going to give you that guy's name. I don't want to let you know who I got in my kitchen cabinet, right?" And that
Right.
could lead us into our next conversation, is like, what is left for mid majors in this new? I mean, I had somebody today, a former player, tell me I had Two former players tell me today, uh, a mid-major will never win the College World Series ever again. Maybe that's a little dramatic, but maybe there's some truth to that. And someone else told me the mid-majors are basically now minor leagues for the power conferences. Go instead of T2, JUCO, whatever, go play at a mid-major for a year or two. We'll pick you up when you're ready in 2 years. We'll give you a nice little check to come play for us, and then the mid-major coaches are back to the drawing board.
Yeah, it's difficult with baseball, man, because I do feel like that system of tiers of the power whatever, power four and the mid major, that split. I think it affects a sport like baseball a little bit more than it affects the more cooperative movement team sports like a football, like a basketball. Just
Yeah,
because every single incident is so isolated in baseball that every single individual player and there's so many baseball players that you need. And just to have the depth of a roster that can go deep in their conference, win their conference, go play in a college baseball World Series, go deep into that tournament. You need resources. You need resources to get that many guys on your roster and have the depth that's necessary, the pitching staff necessary, the hitting necessary to do that.
yeah.
And so it's
No,
hard. I think it's really I think it really affects baseball more than it does those other sports. NIL is going to be very difficult to deal with, and the fact of the matter is, or to compete with, I should say. And the fact of the matter is, UTSA is so far away from really being competitive on an NIL, not even just NIL, on a baseball recruiting front in terms of NIL, in terms of facilities. It's you can sell great baseball play, you can sell a competitive schedule, you can sell good conference, good opponents, but
yeah.
that's not moving the needle for the best guys coming out of high school or coming in the transfer portal.
Well, and did they? I mean, did UTSA athletics? And I know that it's not necessarily fair to put the current administration into this because we've seen some of the ways that Dr. Campos and her staff have been able to change things and move the needle even if a little bit. But has it been too many years of kicking the can down the road and not investing? There's something romantic about the bird bath and where it is and the simplicity of it all. But at the same time, like you said, it doesn't necessarily have that sexiness right now that the kids coming up maybe want.
Well,
And
and here's a big debate that I think UTSA fans can have for a very long time. But where to how and where to prioritize those resources. I get it. Basketball might be a bigger needle mover for people, and maybe that venue allows you to do more things. Having a bigger basketball venue allows you to do more things as a university on your university in cooperation with other entities as well. But there's something to say about striking when the iron's hot. And when UTSA baseball made that run to the Conference USA tournament final and lost that game, there was so much buy-in. People were raving about that program. We're still seeing the residual effects of that run happen now with the buy-in to UTSA, at least from a fandom perspective. Not talking about the Exodus, of course, but a lot more people care a lot more about UTSA baseball over the last 3 years than had the prior 15 to 20. And I think that's totally a fair statement to say. Might be minus maybe a couple of outlier years. We were taking over Southland and stuff like that. But
yeah,
outside of that, we've seen it's just enormous support, this tidal wave support happen behind this winning that Pat Hallmark has ushered in. Same thing that's happened with the football team. And at that moment is whenever you go and you say, we're going to do this, that, and the other for UTSA baseball because we're winning and we want to keep winning, but we're going to need your help to keep winning. And everyone's throwing their dollars at that cause after you come one inning away from a Conference USA trophy, right? Everyone's throwing their dollars at that cause whenever Pat Hallmark is winning and winning and retaining all of his guys and playing exciting baseball and knocking off ranked Stanford and getting real close to beating an A&M at Bluebell. People love that kind of stuff, but instead we committed resources to basketball. I'm not saying that was the wrong decision, but I am saying it's a worthy debate to have on whether or not baseball should have gotten those dollars first, or at least an allocation of more of those dollars, right? Because they were winning. And I think if you say, hey, we already have this much to commit to baseball, but we want to get to this much, you're going to get people to throw more money. You're going to get those big donors to throw more money because they love the fact that UTSA is winning right now. And so you've got to strike while the iron's hot. And this is a point that Jared has pointed to time and time and time again, talking about when UTSA was having football, that is, having its early success in 2011, 2012, 2013. That was the time to go ask for money because we were winning and people were enamored with UTSA football. You had an opportunity to do that with UTSA baseball, but right now, if you're entering a rebuild era, and now Pat Hallmark's going to enter the slump of his tenure here at UTSA, and now baseball goes into sub 500 records for a couple of seasons. Well, guess where the buy-in goes? Away.
Yeah.
Nobody is paying attention to UTSA baseball when that happens. And so, I think that's an argument we could have all day. And if Pat Hallmark can say, or if Lisa Campos, if he could point and say, Lisa Campos says we're going to have shovels in the ground on this day, or this, that, and the other is coming. Our situation is going to prove by these very, very tangible measures that we have. Money is already there. Can he hold on to a couple of those guys that have 1 year of eligibility left? Can he keep Matt King? Can he keep, well, those contributors, those impact players for their last year? I don't know. I mean, he probably has a better argument to, at least. He probably has
Yeah.
a better argument to get more NIL dollars to help keep those guys.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, it's interesting, and this, they're both mid majors, but East Carolina and
mhm.
where they are as a program versus like a UTSA, right? Those are two stark differences. You look at like super regionals. I mean, UTSA, I don't believe they've ever even won a regional game when they've gone, but and ECU's been to supers and everything. But you look at all the chatter around this season when ECU was petitioning, and you had their coach post a stationery from his desk of all the reasons why ECU deserved to host. But the point of what I'm getting at with this is like they had an atmosphere that was like they could host in, right? And they had 6,000 screaming fans, 7,000 screaming fans at that regional. And
Right.
I've heard broadcasters talk about how much a regional, how much hosting, how much getting to a super regional can do for mid-major. And I've said it before, one of the best things that could happen to UTSA baseball is to be in a position of like on a host bubble, where they were maybe 2 years ago, even last like 3 years ago or even 2 years ago. And in that conversation of like, hey, your RPI can maybe be in a situation of hosting, and for it to be like, well, but you don't have the resources, or well, we're gonna move it down to Nelson Wolf. If that
Right.
happened, that would probably be the best thing to happen for UTSA baseball in terms of some very serious things getting built very quickly. Um,
Yeah.
and it's hard because we're talking about like, are we going to be like, I mean, I was more optimistic coming to the season. Jared was, he was like, yeah, I just don't know like what it's going to be like. There's a lot of unknowns, and we kind of saw that waver throughout the season, right? The up and down. It looks like right now we're going to be in that similar position, 10 months from now, 9 months from now, uh, when we're assessing the team in the first weekend of February, second weekend of February. But that's where they've got, like what you're saying, that's what they've got to do to generate all of that.
I mean, it's just so scary to think about how many steps back this could potentially set a program.
Yeah.
A mass exodus like this, and then it makes it very, very hard to be attractive. You don't have really anything to sell people right now. It's really, really difficult. The only thing you have to sell is starting time and a competitive schedule, right? That's really, really difficult. Whenever we're talking about the trend of Trailer and Hallmark both getting to their programs whenever they were in a relative state of shambles, doing a complete 180 with on the field results almost immediately, and then having this trend line go up and up and up. UTSA football is not about to take um, 2 or 3 or 10 steps back any offseason soon. It's just not going to happen. Even whenever Trailer leaves, UTSA can make the right hire and retain a lot of what they have football wise without going into rebuild mode. UTSA baseball, if they have to go into rebuild mode, I mean, how long does it take to get back to being an inning away from hoisting a conference tournament trophy, from getting buy-in from the fans to filled 1,000+ fans in the stadium, for a weekend game, getting the donors' dollars, the NIL dollars thwarted, right? I mean, like really spearheading and just having this massive increase in those dollars. How long is it going to take to get back to that place performance wise on the field? Because 2025, are we talking about 2030? Are we talking about 2027? Is it going to take Hallmark a year? Is it going to get really bad for Hallmark? We're going to have to bring in another coach to do it. Because this is really scary. I don't know. Whenever I see how long the list is, whenever I see the names that are on the list, it just feels like um there's just no way you're going to recover from this right away. It's going to take at least 2 to 3 seasons to recover from something like this. I can't imagine it happens in one off-season turnaround.
Yeah, it's probably more. Yeah, I mean, if we're being honest, it may be more objectively realistic to think like, yeah, it's going to be a couple years, and then it's hard too because then you're dealing with those same things. You're dealing with the same things next year. Maybe maybe you don't see a mass exodus, but if you bring a kid out of high school, or if a freshman who got drafted as a senior in high school, like if Robert Orlowski turns a corner next year and
Mm,
finds how to have consistent 6, 7 inning outings and gets his fastball to have more movement and the things he needs to work on as a young as a young freshman who was thrown in as a Friday starter for a Division 1 baseball team with high aspirations. Like you still have to worry about the bigger schools when they come calling or they sneak into, like we've heard coaches implicated, right?
yeah.
In interviews. I mean, you look like Texas A&M, they're playing tonight for the national championship. Last year they had, or coming into the season by D1 baseball, they had the number 4 uh freshman class coming in, and then the number 4 transfer portal class. So top 5
Hmm.
class. Both of the ways you get better in terms of players coming to your program, they had top 5. And we saw the type of year they put forth in the wins. They didn't lose to a Texas school all season. Um, they're in the national championship tonight. So I don't know how long it is, and yeah, it I think we've talked about this before, right? Like whether it's at tailgates or you know just hanging out, like it can crash a lot faster and a lot harder than it takes to build it up. And there can be a lot of things that make it
Right.
tumble.
Exactly. Exactly. And I don't know, just to like bluntly say it, this to me feels like in all likelihood a long-term setback for this baseball program. Something that has undone the last 2, 3 years of extreme, immense progress that this baseball team has made. Feels like it's been overnight taken away, erased. And now you're looking at a rebuild period that's going to take a couple of seasons, a few seasons. That's what it
Yeah,
feels like. It's absolutely
yeah,
what it feels like. And it sucks. I mean, this it really sucks.
yeah. I will say, getting back to just playing time and what we were talking about, I think baseball's hard because you look at the two things about college baseball. The regular season is only 55 games. You see guys in the big leagues and they'll slump, right? But they have 5, 10, 15 games to kind of work through it. You don't necessarily get that at the college level, unless if you're like maybe a 4 year starter, it's like, all right, he's dealing with a nagging injury, he's going to work through it, or we need him to play because even at 75%, he's better than our next guy. Um, and then so you look at that and you incorporate and mind you, this is my bird's eye view coming from somebody who peaked at Little League. Um, it seems like Coach Hallmark's like an old school coach, and when things aren't going well, like when you go
Mhm.
through the first month of non-conference play and you're creeping above 500, when you're dropping series to A&M Corpus Christi, when you're losing Tuesday games on the road to Tarleton. I mean, they ended up having a pretty good season, but you know, the some of the games they were losing and the way they were losing, um, that that style of coaching isn't the most fun to come to practice with. I'm not saying it's
Sure.
wrong. I'm not saying I disagree with it. Me personally, I like that style of coaching. That's my own opinion, but when you're 20 and 18 or 10 and 10 and 8 or 9 and 11, it's not as fun of a style. So now what the kids do is like, well, I'm going to go find something else.
100%.
And then the other thing about baseball that's hard is, you know, you make an error in baseball and you get pulled. We saw that happen a couple times this season, right? Getting back to that style of coaching where guys made an error and all of a sudden they didn't come out the next half inning. Your day's done. You're not going back out 3 innings later. If you're a platoon guy, you're not coming back in the next time the lefty comes in or the righty comes in. That's tough about baseball. There's not like when somebody else takes your spot, your day is done. And you look at some of these guys, some of these journeymen that are transferring, and you look at their games played versus their plate appearances, and it's like, okay, so maybe they got pinch hit early, maybe they got taken out defensively early. When school is as much as it is, and scholarships are as scarce as they are, like
Hmm.
sparse as they are, excuse me, then it's another factor to consider. And I mean, I don't know how coaches manage the transfer portal, and I don't know how they're gonna keep up with it at the mid-major level.
Yeah, I think if there's anything that can maybe be pointed to, and we're not here to speculate, but yeah, Coach Hallmark is an old-fashioned, old school coach, right? A little more, and it's what people love about him. It's what players love about him, but it's probably also what some players don't love about him, right? Is not going to just pat you on the back and be the player's coach, which through modern times, this has happened sort of across all sports, right? The player's coach versus the old-fashioned military style coach debate, the drill sergeant coach. But look, this guy's fiery, he's passing, knows how to win, and he goes to bat for his guys, right? That's why we see him getting thrown out of games so many times. I see a lot of similarities between Pat Hallmark and Jeff Traylor. I feel like the guys that do love playing for Pat Hallmark really, really do love playing for Pat Hallmark. But it is weird, and I've been in I've been at some of the games, I've been in the stands, and I've talked to people, and I've always just gotten really good reception as far as what the temperament in the locker room was, what the energy was, what the baseball culture was around this dugout. It always seemed extremely positive, and guys loved being here and loved playing with each other, for Pat. So I don't know. But it just can't be all coincidental
Yeah.
that this many names are on this. So I don't know, Dan. I don't know if there's more dirt here. It feels like there has to be something. Who knows if we'll ever find out? I think the biggest thing to be nervous about is over the next week, like you alluded to earlier, is there another wave of the Exodus coming, or is this the full list already?
I mean, July 2nd is what, 9 days away, right? I I don't know. The way we've had some other waves, yeah. It's not like everyone left at once, right? Or like it's not like there was a coaching change at the end of the season and within a week's time every single person entered. It was like I mentioned this already, so I don't want to be a broken record, but like there was a couple waves to it, and
There's a weird trickle down sort of thing that's happened. I mean, the conference tournament ended a month ago.
yeah.
We're already well into the off season, well into the portal period.
And I'll say this too, like there is an interesting thing where, and maybe this is just a timing thing. Maybe it's maybe it's not coincidental. I don't know, but it seems like there's always a a, a contributor or like a big impact guy makes his announcement, and then you see a couple guys follow suit, right?
Right.
Um, and maybe that's again, maybe that's just a timing thing, or maybe there's more to that. That's all speculation, just off of how things have transpired so far. But you saw Matt enter, and then you saw some guys enter. You saw Isaiah enter, and you saw some guys enter. Um, Ruger entered. You saw somebody enter, pretty quickly after Ruger. Um,
Right. Yeah.
we'll see.
No Coops.
We'll see what happens. Buckle up, right?
Ruger's tough, sort of semi-local, right? We're really got
Yeah,
Central Texas guy, Hill Country guy. Same with
yeah,
Aiden. Um, yeah, dude, it's just really, really strange. Um, I do know one thing, however, as far as around the bird bath is concerned,
yeah.
y'all gonna have content coming like for the next several months because we're putting together a whole new baseball team at UTSA. And I'm sure Dan is gonna be all over that. As every single new person arrives on the roster, we'll have to have a full breakdown and meet the guy. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
Dan, no off season for Dan. I'm sorry to tell you, bud.
and I haven't even. I mean, I was gonna lead with this, and then we kind of just started, hit it full speed running. I haven't even like I thought the next episode I was gonna bring the listeners was a Where Are They Now? I'm lining up a really good, really relevant Where Are They Now? To some
Mhm.
recent UTSA athletic news. We'll drop that little hint. I'm trying to finalize that. I still need to do my it feels weird now with all these guys leaving, but I still need to do my senior send off and end of season wrap up. Maybe change that up a little bit. I like to do a summer check in with the guys playing summer ball. How many
Yep.
guys playing summer ball are still going to be at UTSA next season? That's
Yep.
kind of awkward. Um, so there's, I mean, yeah, the content might look a little different, but still going to be looking for creative and interesting ways to keep everyone in the loop. Appreciate everyone's support as always. Adrian, I messaged you like 4 hours ago and asked you if you could do this. So really appreciate you hopping on.
I've been
You
itching to
and
get back on the pod, man. So
well,
yeah, the
I'll have
stars
to,
aligned. The stars
yeah,
aligned for us.
we have had people asking for Adrian's voice. So it, what better way to bring him back than in a non-football baseball, maybe the first baseball emergency podcast we've ever had, right?
Yeah, you might be right, Dan. Wow. Wow. Well, I appreciate the banter. Despite it being a pretty gloomy topic.
Yeah.
Um, I really don't know what to leave people with, but chin up, I suppose. Right? There is hope.
Yeah.
I think as long as Pat Hallmark is staying at UTSA, we're in the best position to weather through this. So I mean, let's hope
I mean,
he's not the next one to announce he's transferring somewhere.
excuse me. I mean, yeah, I mean he's a winning coach, right? When he was an assistant at Rice, they were very successful. Uh I think right before UTSA hired him away from UIW, he was Southland Coach of the Year in
Mhm.
2019.
That's right.
Had a short little tiny stint at Missouri in between all of that, but came to UTSA, the only coach that has won 38 games, multiple seasons in his tenure. And I mean, yeah, we'll see. It's definitely gonna be a challenge for him and his staff. They've got a lot of work to do and maybe to be done, depending on what else transpires. But they can get the best out of their guys. We've had guys tell us that, right? So we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see what happens, but it should be exciting to watch.
Fingers crossed, Dan.
All right.
Godspeed.
Well, thanks, Adrian. Birds up.